This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
So it was 1 year ago today. We caught up with one
Today?
of the apparently
time flies.
I was talking with our producer Paul Brennan. I'm like, wait a minute, was this like a year ago? And he's like, exactly 1 year ago. We caught up with one of the iconic chefs of our times, who has definitely become a household name. We're talking about Emeril Lagasse.
Yeah, when he was here, he talked about his new Roku show. He also talked about sharing his love of cooking with the next generation, specifically his son, EJ. And so we wanted to catch up with him.
We did indeed. EJ Lagasse is here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. By the way, just awarded the prestigious New Talent of the Year award from La Liste, a French ranking and
Your
restaurants
French is
guide.
good, Carol. I know you said yesterday it wasn't.
Not her math, though.
Stop. They're going to pick me apart here. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Your
Thanks so
dad
much.
was so much fun. And when he started talking about what was going on and kind of passing to the next generation and your involvement,
Sure.
we're like, we've got to talk to you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun together, obviously. There's been a lot of growing up in a household of cooking and things like that.
What was that like? Take us there.
It was a very interesting thing, because what ended up happening is I said to him when I was 4, 5, 6 years old, hey, I really enjoy this. I love doing this. And, it started with like chicken noodle soup and stuff like that, and start doing, dicing carrots and things like that. And then it really just became an obsession completely for myself, where everything was about it. It was either, as I got older, reading about it, things like that. But, I spent a lot of time in New York City when I was a kid, and so we got to eat out in some incredible restaurants, not only in New Orleans but in New York as well. And,
right.
And so I think that it was a mix of, growing up with him in being a chef, obviously, and being well known, which I didn't really get it. He was in that.
Like, when do you
Disney-
realize that as a kid, right? That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, it was. I thought he was a big deal because of Princess and the Frog, the Disney movie. To completely honest, I really did, because he was the gator in Princess and the Frog, and so I thought people were stopping him on the streets of Manhattan because he was in Princess and the Frog. And then I was like, I kind of realized maybe there's some other stuff to it. And but there was always so much fun because I got to spend time on set at Emeril Live growing up and things like that, and so I was always around food, whether it be in the food media space or also obviously like in the house, cooking and stuff. So it was always an interest in it.
What was it like? Would your dad come home from being at work all day and actually want to be in the kitchen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing for me. Like I'll finish dinner service and it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'll get home and I will full-blown cook until 4 a.m.
What will you make?
It depends, right? We have our cravings that we all like to satisfy and stuff, but my grandparents Portuguese on my dad's side, so I grew up eating a lot of Portuguese food, both from my grandmother and then my dad. So I'll make sometimes Portuguese food. I normally, what I'll do to hold it over is I'll spend 2 nights a week after dinner service cooking, and then keep stuff that'll stay around for a bit. So there's Portuguese kale soup caldo verde. It's like absolutely unbelievable, and it's the best thing ever. It's potato, kale, chorizo. Like that's it. It's so simple. And so that was always something that I keep around. It sits for a few days. So yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could have brought
Well, I always wonder why someone likes cooking. I have a mother who loved cooking and would read cookbooks.
Yeah.
I have a sister who's kind of like that. I'm not. My husband cooks, and loves doing that kind of stuff. So why do you like cooking? Do you think it was because of how you grew up, or is it something like, do you think you would have done it if you weren't around your dad and kind of in that atmosphere?
That's a very good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that. I think that I have a love for food myself, right? That I think is independent from my father a bit. I think that there's a lot of passion that I have for it. That is a naturally occurring passion, but it's certainly exaggerated the passion having my dad be so involved and always willing to show, in a sort of educational sense, show a lot about cooking, which was great. He did it on television for many years, showing everybody, how to cook and things like that.
Kind of really one of the first individuals, if you think about
I
it,
think so,
those.
yeah, I think so. And it carried over for sure into the house. So
I want to know how you felt about the desire to prove yourself in the kitchen when you come from a family that is so well known for cooking. When somebody who might not know you might say to themselves, well, look where he is. he's only there because of who his dad is. Like,
Sure.
how do you deal with that criticism? How do you push past it?
Well, it's something that probably comes up quite a bit, that some people would throw out. Look, I mean, the thing is I know I'm comfortable in my own skin. I know the fact that I've spent hours in the kitchens, right, and not ours, which is what I think the big thing was. I think had I stayed in just our kitchens,
Yeah.
and just been at Emeril's or something, that it would very easily be able to say, well, who pushed you to work harder? I remember very early conversation with my father. I mean, this is a conversation he had with me. I'm like 13, 14 years old. And he's like, you're going to have to work twice as hard as anybody in the room because of that. And really, so that was, I think, part of the whole philosophy of me maybe leaving the nest and going and working other places. And I worked here in New York for a bit, and then in London and in Stockholm as well. And so was able to see how other people did it, and I think that was a big key, and being confident in myself to be able to push past that, and then for the comment that comes from that, I would just invite people to eat at the restaurant. That's really all I can do is cook at that point. Right?
And we want to talk about the restaurant that just is reopening after renovation in New Orleans, but you did go to culinary school.
I did, yeah. Johnson
Graduated
Wales.
a year ago?
No, I graduated 3 years ago.
Oh, 3 years ago.
2021, like 2020, 2021.
Forgive me.
No.
But and then what did you learn in that process of kind of, you said you learned different ways of people doing it, but what was that process like as you go around the world?
Well, the process
And
is
did you have an advantage when people are like, I know that last name?
No,
Or was it harder?
In Europe, not really many people knew. I mean, here in New York, they knew, and some of the restaurants that I worked in here, it was really nice because some of them actually kept people from knowing that. It ended up coming out kind of eventually anyway, but
you weren't like, I'm EJ Smith.
Yeah. No, I wasn't, John Smithing my way through the restaurants, but it was a process of working and learning, and it's not just actually like technique or recipes or ingredients or things like that. It was how people conduct themselves in kitchens. I think that was a lot of it too, and how to conduct themselves as restaurateurs and as chefs. That I think I picked up, and it's like learning a language when you're young. You're like a sponge at that point. So,
yeah.
But you're learning. I mean, my dad's an older gentleman now, and I'm.
He's not that
younger.
old.
No. He's,
What is he, like mid-60s?
Yeah, he's like 64.
Yeah.
And so, hey, no.
John Tucker's a little upset.
and so I think that there is that just that we love cooking, and it was always going to be something that I wanted to be able to do, and whether I did it in the restaurants or did it for my family one day or whatever that may be, I was always going to learn how to cook, being his son in that, and I think that he made sure of that. But it ended up, working to my advantage for the restaurant.
Does mom cook?
Mom cooks, yeah.
Is it like you get out? Wait, no, this is like I'm doing it.
No, it's really no. It's not that. I mean, because
I'm from a large family, and when we get together,
Yeah.
we often cook together.
Sure,
but sometimes
sure.
there's one person in charge.
Yeah, of course. I mean, next week for Thanksgiving, it'll be an absolute brawl in the kitchen to see who gets to do what, right? But I think with my mom, the thing was always, it was always good fun because she would, if she was always cooking. She wanted to cook. She's a good cook as well, so it's good fun. But she's got her 10 dishes that she just absolutely nails. Whereas
Can
the
the old
repertoire
guy
goes
ask
up
a
there.
question?
Yeah, of course.
No,
I was waiting on it.
in New York City, it is seriously, it's a revolving door of restaurants,
Yes.
whether or not they serve great food or not.
Absolutely.
And what those challenges, and I would attribute most of that to the insane rents that restaurateurs have to pay.
Sure.
Can you really have a successful restaurant in a place like New York City, a big city where rents are completely out of control?
I think you'd have to ask somebody that's seen that movie, been there, done that, in terms of New York or a place that has rents at the same caliber. I think that there's many great restaurateurs that have stood the test of time. I mean, when I think of New York, I think of Daniel Boulou, I think of Eric Ripert, I think of Jean George, Thomas Keller at Columbus Circle. I think that they've probably got astronomical rents. I have no idea what their agreements are.
And even they sometimes will say it's a tricky business.
Sure. I cannot imagine what that's like to have to deal with that in a city like this. In New Orleans, we're very lucky. Emeril's, where I'm at, we own the building that Emeril's is in, which has been great. And my dad bought it in 1990 when he first opened the place, and it was in an absolute dilapidated part of town that has now, in the last 33 years, come up a bit. So I think we lucked out with that.
What's the biggest challenge right now? I mean, you hear about inflation or whether the input costs.
Yeah, cost of goods, things like that. COGS, things that's a challenge, of course. I think staffing's a challenge, but I think think you have to want to, and in the world right now, you have to want to create an environment that people would be dedicated to working in. And it has to be, I think that post-pandemic, especially in the restaurant business, there's a lot that has changed. There's a lot that's changed everywhere, obviously, but you have people that, that realized I don't want to work 100 hours a week. I don't want to work 90 hours a week, things like that. And so maybe you take on more staff, you're accounting for it that way. But I think that, it's about curating a culture throughout the restaurant reopening of wanting people to still be hungry for something and be something out there and want to be really good at what they're doing. And it takes a team effort to do that. But I think the biggest challenge for most restaurateurs right now, if I had to say, was cost of goods and staffing. I think would be the two things still. Yeah.
How old were you when you went to culinary school?
I was 16, 17.
And how old are you now?
20.
So people listening might not realize how young you are.
Sure.
I mean, even though you grew up in the business, I mean, you're.
Oh, I'm a baby. I'm a baby. It's all good. I'm not ashamed of it. It's fine.
It must also be difficult, though, like separating yourself. I mean, you have the same name as your dad, right?
The exact same name, yeah.
Separating yourself in terms of the way you think about food, the way you think about cooking.
Sure.
How would you say your cooking philosophy is different, or how do you want to distinguish yourself from your dad?
I was asked this the other day by somebody, and I don't know if there's such a need to distinguish and be different. I think that there's a desire to continue on a legacy of stuff that's done, not necessarily through food television, but through the actual restaurants themselves. And there's a standard that I learned as coming up and working in our family restaurants and stuff like that, and just being around there, that I was taught to upkeep. And I think the goal is just sort of curating that, bringing the restaurants into the next stage of their lives. They're restaurants that have been around for 33 years. You can't throw a stick of dynamite in the room, cover the ears, and just let the place, change totally. But, I don't know if I focus enough personally on differentiating myself. I think it's a lot more of paying homage while trying to sort of push things in a new contemporary direction.
John Tucker, what were you doing when you were 20?
What was I doing when I was 20? I think I was parking cars, making a darn good living too, at a restaurant.
There you go.
At a French restaurant.
There you go.
Good tips. Good tips.
Oh, the tips were amazing.
Fantastic.
Helped pay for college, in fact.
There you go.
That's pretty cool.
There you go.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of restaurants, let's talk about the flagship in New Orleans, Emeril's. All started there, some 3 decades and counting. 3 decades ago. Massive renovations. But you say how you are sticking true to your dad and his legacy in terms of food. But there are new tasting menus, and you are shaking it up a bit. Talk to us about the reboot.
I mean, it's been really great fun. I've got a fantastic team at the restaurant. I'd say it's probably split 50-50 New Orleanians to people that are from around the country as well. Some people that I worked with beforehand that have now come and joined us, which has been a real pleasure and an honor. But I think the fun thing is now Emeril's always had a tasting menu. There was the a la carte menu, and the tasting menu was always, I've heard stories of Chef Charlie Trotter and my dad back in the day, like faxing each other tasting menus back and forth and things like that, all the great stories you hear. And so we've always had a tasting menu. And so I think that when I decided to do 2 tasting menus, it's a classic menu and a seasonal menu. It's my take on sort of like the greatest hits album, if you will, with the classics menu. And then with the seasonal stuff, we're really pushing something that my dad was super proud of a long time ago, which was the seasonality of the produce in Louisiana. We're blessed being in the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf South region to be able to have some of the most incredible seafood, I think personally, in the world. And so it's a high utilization of that. It's a lot of local veg, local produce that's coming from independent farmers and things. And, my dad did a lot of that, and I hear a lot of the stories of him from purveyors that are, in their 50s, in their 40s, in their 60s that are telling me, hey, I remember when your dad came to New Orleans and he did this, and this, and this, that, and the other. And I think getting to hear those stories is quite fun. And I say to myself, I said it to my dad the other day, when we opened the restaurant, I said, this must have been what it felt like when you opened the restaurant, because it was just like, it was just, I think, the opening day, we didn't open until 5 p.m. for dinner service, and I think I showed up at 5 a.m. just because I couldn't sleep because I was so excited,
Well, what do you ask your dad about the business?
I mean, I call them from anything from, shrimp stock tips to how we're going to get labor down this month. It just depends on sort of really, what's needed at the moment. He's a wealth of knowledge. I've understood that since I was little. His friends are wealth of knowledge. And being able to have the relationship, I mean, that is the leg up that I have, is that I'm able to contact people and really ask their advice on things that I couldn't even dream of knowing the answer to. So that's a great benefit to me,
Carol and I were actually in New Orleans last week. We had
Yeah.
some great food. We were only there for
like a hit and
less
run.
than 24
Yeah.
hours, so we didn't get to do much except for pretty much have one meal.
Yeah.
And do a lot of work.
Of course,
Yes.
yeah, sure.
But I'm interested in sort of what you're seeing with the economy there locally.
Sure.
And who's coming to eat at the restaurant? Is it mostly tourists? Do you have a mix of locals also? Just tell us what the vibe is.
Yeah, I mean, for us personally at Emeril, I mean, look, we have a restaurant in the airport at MSY in New Orleans. We've got Merrill downtown.
Oh, must not have been in the
which
terminal
is-
that I was in.
No, I think it's in the American terminal.
Okay.
But we have Merrill, which is our sister restaurant downtown, much more fast casual approach to it. And then Emeril's is obviously the flagship, and so I get a good gauge of the local economy because, one, with the airport, I get the numbers of how many people are coming in,
Right.
which is lovely. And Tuesday is the most unbelievable day ever in the city of the city of New Orleans. There's so many people coming in. It's so busy. There was like somebody posted on Facebook or something the other day this video of people waiting in line to go through security. I mean, there's so many people coming
Wow.
through to New Orleans.
Interesting.
So I think that New Orleans is a very tourist-centric place anyway, I think it's something like in the greater New Orleans area, like 1 million residents, and there's some, 25 or 30 million visitors a year, something nuts like that. And so, I mean, I think any restaurant in New Orleans really does have a lot of tourists coming to it. But, it was really great for me. It was humbling because we reopened. And I expected the normal numbers of lots of tourists coming in and things like that. And it was a lot of locals. We've been open for nearly 4 weeks now. And I have seen more familiar faces in the last couple of weeks than I have before, which is really lovely. And people are coming. And I've had repeat guests come back 2-3 times since then. And reservations are filling up with a lot of, 504 area code numbers. So that's a good sign when it comes to the local clientele.
Right.
But, we're still getting, guests coming. A lot of people, obviously, from New York and things like that. And people who... The conferences that are in New Orleans really drive a lot of the economy there as well. I think it's a very tourism and conference sort of, convention.
And they're looking to do a lot
And they're
more.
looking to do a lot more. And the city has always been great about that. And there are private companies and public companies that are doing stuff to support, people coming through the city. New Orleans and Company is a
We
tourism
spoke
thing.
to them last week.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, they're working with this, and they have, we'll get through Vegas this year with the Super Bowl. We have restaurants out there, so we'll be busy for that. But then, the Super Bowl will be in New Orleans next year. So there's a lot going on.
So what's the future for you, and where's growth in terms of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me personally, I would be so thrilled with being at Emeril's and having that celebrate a 6th birthday,
Do you wanna be on
33
TV?
years from now. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, it's not something I'm out there like,
Yeah.
beating the doors down. But if something felt right, I would probably do it. But I think that for me, the goal right now is the cooking that's happening at Emeril's.
Yeah.
What's going on there with the team and trying to sort of, rewrite our steps and things at Emeril's and focus on the new, which Dad's loving as well, and we're having so much fun doing. But I'm sure there'll be other restaurant projects that come up and things like that. And every time I'm in this city, somebody asks me if I'm going to open in New York at some point or something, and I don't know the answer. You have to see, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things. It's exciting.
What about doing media the way that your dad did and does?
I mean, in terms of things like Food Network and stuff like
Yeah.
that, I mean, as I said, it's just one of those things that we'll see what sort of comes of it. It's not something I'm pushing for, but
It's different now too.
Yeah, it's very different.
It's like a lot of it's social based.
Yeah.
You see the videos on TikTok
Yeah,
and on
things like
Instagram,
that, yeah.
and it's interesting to see the way that, it's certainly a conversation about the broader media
Sure.
landscape, but it's certainly different than it was just a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, my dad talking about the Roku show.
Yeah.
like that's an
Yeah,
adjustment
yeah.
for him being on a streaming platform rather than on television, which is funny to see him, do. It's great.
But it's kind of the world, right?
Yeah,
Now
I mean that's how it is,
EJ, I mean, it is kind of interesting in terms of growth. How do you guys figure out, what's really profitable for you guys? Is it the airport? Is it the big like what is it? Is it the flagship? Like,
Well, I mean, you know, it's split up in a couple of different ways. Some restaurants that we approach from a like a licensing point of view, where we're licensing either the menu or the name or the concept or something like that. And then we have, you know, some concepts that are sort of ours that we're like, okay, this is ours. If we're going to open another one of these or we're going to open a new one of these, it's going to be our type of thing. It's going to be a deal where we either own the building or we lease it.
Oh, you do, yeah.
And then we operate it. You know, the licensing thing is normally a company comes in and they bring you in. It's a lot of hotels or casinos or things like that, and they bring you in and they license the menus and such, and then you sort of release it to them, and they operate it really.
or cruise ships?
Yeah, cruise ships, things like that. Yeah, we're on Carnival Cruise Lines.
How much are you thinking about business versus food?
I think a lot about business because I sort of, that's a role that I've stepped into. I think that when I moved back to New Orleans, I thought I was going to just be cooking eggs all day and, you know, getting to just cook.
But do you spend more of your time thinking about, okay, this is how much we're going to have to pay for food, this is how much we're going to have to pay for labor, just in the last 30 seconds
well, I mean,
that we have?
certainly, like, I mean, running a restaurant, you know, I mean, I am running the restaurant. So I've got an amazing team of accountants and a lot of great people that know what they're doing. So it's great to be surrounded by that to allow me to focus on food when I can. But that's sort of the thing, you know. It's running a restaurant.
Most important question: what kind of pie on Thanksgiving? Is it pecan?
I'm an apple pie guy.
All
I'm an
right.
apple pie guy, and they're in season right now, and they're lovely. So
Just checking. A la mode, a little ice cream.
yeah, oh yeah, certainly.
Gotta heat it
Certainly.
up, too?
Yeah, oh yeah, for
I'm
sure.
just gonna say, John Tucker, what kind of pie are you?
What are you serving at your house?
Yes. Good answer.
Nobody's home. Nobody's home.
Carol, where are you?
EJ, thank you so much.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Wish your family well, your dad well,
Thank you
and good
so
luck,
much.
and look
It's nice
forward
to see all of you.
to following it all. EJ Lagasse, chef, restaurateur, Emeril's Restaurants. This is Bloomberg.